You know, there was a video that I recently saw that came from TikTok, and we had reposted it to our page. It was of a Chinese young lady that's actually speaking the truth about what's going on right now with them pushing this particular propaganda of using isolated incidents by mentally ill people or homeless people, and they run it in a loop like we talked about this knockout game we kept seeing a few years ago. When they're trying to push some sort of legislation to try to mass incarcerate black people again, or get some sort of funding for the race soldiers. But let me go ahead and play this clip of this young lady, and then let's talk about something that she brings up in this video.
Done with you Asians who think having a race war with the black community is in our favor. No, it fucking is not. And y'all always want to bring up black people attacking Asians during the post-COVID era, which has happened a few times, but guess what, bitch? There are gonna be bad people in every race. Remember, anti-Asian is always rooted in white supremacy, but a person of any race can be influenced by white supremacy. So those black people that attacked us were subscribing to the white supremacist narrative that Asians caused COVID. And if you blame black people as a whole for the anti-Asian hate crimes, you're subscribing to the white supremacist narrative that black people are inherently aggressive. And y'all Asians who are like, why aren't black people standing with us? Bitch, be grateful, because they've always stood with us. Frederick Douglass in 1882 made the time to openly denounce the Chinese Exclusion Act while the black community was going through so much, such as rampant lynchings against them. They worked hand in hand with us to free the Japanese people in the internment camps in 1942. And we directly benefited from black-led civil rights movements every single time. So stop blaming and demanding things from them, and unlearn your anti-blackness first.
Now, you need to know about the Chinese Exclusion Act. This was actually a federal law that was in the United States, signed by President Chester A. Arthur on May the 6th, 1882, prohibiting all immigration of Chinese laborers. Now, that's one of the laws that was on the books that specifically targeted, one group they did not want in this country at all. Now, they said it was building on the earlier Page Act of 1875, which barred Chinese women from immigrating to the United States. They say the Chinese Exclusion Act was the first and remains the only law to have been implemented to prevent all members of a specific ethnic or national group from immigrating to the United States. So it said the act actually followed the Angel Treaty of 1880 and set revisions to the U.S.-China Burlingame Treaty of 1868. It said allowed the U.S. to suspend Chinese immigration. It said the act was initially intended to last for 10 years. It said, but was renewed and strengthened in 1892 with the Gary Act. It said, which made permanent in 1902. It said the laws attempted to stop all Chinese immigration into the United States for 10 years, with the exceptions for diplomats, teachers, students, merchants, and travelers. It said the laws were widely evaded, though. Okay, so it was repealed by the Magnuson Act. It's in December 17, 1943, which allowed 105 Chinese per year to come to the United States, and the Chinese immigration later increased with the passage of the Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1952, which abolished direct racial barriers, and later by the 1965 Immigration Act, which abolished national origins formula. Now, we were the people that was fighting about racism or racism blocking policies of people all over the world that can come in to this country. It was black people fighting. When you look at the Chinese Exclusion Act, as she said, Frederick Douglass spoke against the Chinese Exclusion Act. But let me, tell you exactly how, a lot of that got started. Well, a lot of the Chinese came over here during the gold rush in California. And when gold was plentiful, they was, the white folks was cool with them being here. But when it got to the point that the gold got scarce, okay, then that's when they started getting upset because they could not really compete. And anytime they had to compete, whether it's with Chinese people, black people, they start doing the things that they normally do, okay, which is, we know the history. And let's talk about after the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed, the driving out period. See, they're not going to teach you this American history we're about to talk about. So after the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed, the driving out era, as they talk about, was born. And they had a lot of anti-Chinese, it's a Americans physically forced Chinese communities to flee to other areas. A large-scale violence in western states, including the Rock Springs Chinese massacre in 1885 and Hell's Canyon massacre of 1887. Okay, so the Rock Springs massacre of 1885 was named for the time where it took place, Rock Springs, Wyoming, in Sweetwater County. They said where white miners were jealous of the Chinese for their employment. Now, that was the same sentiments for Black Wall Street. They were jealous because black folks were doing things for themselves, doing on our own. And you notice every single time a brother was lynched, a lot of them were businessmen who did for themselves. And they were jealous because the black people are actually running a business and not living in squalor like some of them. They get jealous and they say, oh, he uppity, let's go lynch him. Same thing with the Chinese. This has been their MO forever. But, you know, a lot of people in Chinese history or different Asian, Americans don't even talk about these massacres. Now, I say the white miners expressed their jealous frustration by robbing, bullying, shooting, and stabbing the Chinese in Chinatown with sharp objects. You see, the first person to attack Asians wasn't nobody but the white supremacists. Okay? So they said the Chinese tried to flee, but they were burned alive in their homes. That sounds familiar. That sounds really familiar. They say starved to death in hidden refuge or exposed to animal predators in the mountains. They some were rescued by a passing train. They say, but at the end of the event, at least 28 lives have been taken in an attempt to appease the situation. The government intervened by sending federal troops to protect the Chinese. However, only compensations for destroyed property were paid. No one arrested nor held accountable for the atrocities committed during the riot. That sounds like today. Nothing has changed. And this was 1885. Nothing has changed. These white supremacists do all the things they're doing. And I told you they have an immunity of law. That was from 1885 to 2021. That's part of the package of white supremacy, an immunity of law. They know what they were doing. They can see them do it all day long. But if anything happened to them, it's like, don't do that. Now go home. Now they have another one, Hell's Canyon massacre of 1887. They said the massacre was named, for the location where it took place. It said along the Snake River in Hell's Canyon near the mouth of the Deep Creek. Now, they said that the area contained many rock cliffs and white rapids that together pose significant danger to human safety. They said 34 Chinese miners were killed in cold blood at the site. They said the miners were employed by Sam Yup Company, as one of the 6 largest Chinese companies at the time, which worked in the area, since 1886. So the actual events, they said, is kind of still unclear due to unreliable law enforcement, at the time, and biased news reporting. Biased news reporting been happening since 1887 too. You understand? Like I said, the white media is the propaganda and public relations firm for, the system of white supremacy. You have to understand that. They said a lack of serious official investigations, just like today. However, they said that it was speculated the dead Chinese miners were not victims of natural causes, but rather gunshot wounds during the robbery by a gang of 7 armed horse thieves. They said gold worth $4,000 to $5,000 was thought to have been stolen from the miners. They said the gold was never recovered nor further investigated. They say recent attempts to formulate an accurate picture of events, they say, were from drawn hidden copies, they say, of trial documents and contain grand jury indictments. They said depositions given by the accused notes from the trial and historical accounts of Wallow County by J. Harlan Horner and H. Ross Fitley. Now, let me tell you, let me go to these Fitley accounts. Now, they said that they have 31 confirmed victims, as they according to their accounts, okay? And they said these people, like I said, just constantly was attacking Asians, okay? They was also lynching Asians, Chinese, to be exact. So you look at, as this woman is saying about different policies, she talked about the Japanese internment camps and how Japanese people literally put in internment camps on U.S. soil. Okay. And these people are openly racist toward Japanese people during that time period. They used to call them racial slurs. They used to tell them they don't want them in their neighborhoods. They didn't love no Japanese, Chinese, or any Asian people. If you was not Mzungu, you were hated. That's exactly the way it was in this country. And even other Mzungu groups like the Italians, the Jewish people, Polish people, Irish, all these groups were literally hated in this country. Just to make sure we add them. They had signs that say no Irish, no Jewish people, no nothing. Okay? So you look at the Japanese internment camps. Black folks spoke against that. Black folks said that's wrong. Fighting for the Asian community once again. Now the Japanese people got $20,000 apiece as a reparation under Ronald Reagan. We look at the passage of the affirmative action, which would benefit Asian people as well. But yet you have some Asian people, not all, are fighting against affirmative action because they actually think that if affirmative action is removed, it's going to give them a better chance at certain schools. Well, they understand the moment affirmative action is removed, then they can revert back to what it was. Well, white folks, what they used to do, see, people don't understand how it was in this country prior to affirmative action. How it was if a black person had made an application, then they used to put a black dot on it. Or somebody outside of white used to put little dots on them. And then when they go through the application process, they say, oh, throw that away. Oh, throw that away. And only hire white folks at that time period. Okay. So do you really want to go back to that? Even though when their rule is dwindling, and you really want to go back to that, those in the Asian community that's pushing that issue, if it wouldn't been affirmative action, some of you wouldn't even got a job. And some of you to this day are talking about how you still aren't getting jobs, even though they do have affirmative action. And then all of a sudden, it's like you forgot your whole history about you being murdered by the white supremacists, lynched by the white supremacists, the Chinese people being burnt alive in their homes, starving to death, have to run in the mountains and getting ate up by animals that's out there. See, you don't talk about all that terrorism that happened on U.S. soil to you. How do you get cozy with the white supremacists? I don't understand that. That doesn't make sense when that has been your history. This is why a lot of people that knew the history, when a lot of people came over, even with the Vietnam War, people was cool, with people from Vietnam. They say Bruce Lee. Everybody loved Bruce Lee. Definitely in the black community, a lot of people love Bruce Lee. You understand what I'm saying? But then folks, the show Kung Fu wasn't even supposed to be with nobody but Bruce Lee. You understand what I'm saying? So what we're trying to understand here is that those of you who doing it, of course, not all, you really betting on the group of people that historically, terrorized and killed your own, and even said that y'all couldn't even come in here. Your women couldn't even come in here. That's why other groups can get with the white supremacists, because they're so strategic to not teach you American history. Because what we talking about is American history. We're not talking about nothing foreign, things that happen right here in this country and on this soil. And there's many Asians that have said that they have been attacked by the white supremacists, but they're afraid to say anything. But they tell them, hey, you could talk about that, black person that pushed you or punched you, but you better not talk about the white supremacists that called you racial slurs and killed this person. You better not talk about that. You understand? So what I'm saying is, what that young lady said, it's not wise. It's not wise historically. It's not wise because black folks has never burned you out of your homes. Black folks have never wanted laws to keep you out. Black folks have never said, oh, well, they compete with me. Let me go attack them. You have businesses in our neighborhoods. If that's not direct competition, I don't know what is. And black folks still never tell you get out, run you out. And y'all know how we get down. We get pissed off. We burn, tear the city up. You know how black folks get down. And we have never done that to you in our neighborhoods. So sometimes you need to think, before you act, because I'm telling you, you bet all your chips on white supremacy if you want to. White supremacy is only loyal to itself. That's any of you groups that's outside of black folks and then white folks too. Any of you could bet on them if you want to. We have been knowing who they are for hundreds and hundreds of years. You should ask us questions how to deal with that and move accordingly. But when you bet all your chips on them, you'll see. You will see. You will see. But shout out to this young lady for saying it, because she needs to say it to her own community. That's fine. I'm not, doing that, but I just wanted to follow up behind the history and why it doesn't make sense to do what they're doing when you have a history of white supremacist terrorism upon your people as well. But leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about, this particular story here, with, a little history of America and how, white supremacists have definitely waged terrorism on different Asian Americans back in that time period. And if you have not done so, check out our African Diaspora News Channel app. You can check it out in the App Store and Google Play.